Beyond Glass Cases is a 3-year project that is funded by the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage here in Philadelphia. And it's a project that is meant to allow the library company to explore its exhibitions program, to allow us to have conversations about provocative and challenging objects in our collection that relate directly to some of the issues that are impacting society today, and to allow us to engage with a broader audience than perhaps some of our past exhibitions have done. We knew from the outset that we wanted to have these 3 projects, so we needed 3 partners on them. One of them signed up for the project from the start, and that was Paul Wolff Mitchell. Paul was a research fellow here and had already been doing pretty intense work with the archive of Samuel George Morton, who's the focus of his Beyond Glass Cases project.
As a white researcher in this area, I try not to overburden this with my opinions about what's important, although I have some sense of that myself, frankly. I think that insofar as I'm talking about like the history of scientific racism, and this, for what it's worth, could be on the record. I'm just trying to articulate my stance here. As I approach this work to be in conversation with the communities who are impacted by this history, and that involves not only a great deal of thoroughness in the kind of research that I do, but also sensitivity. But I think fundamentally, I believe that these archives are crucial and are important for understanding not just the histories of those individuals whose remains ended up in Morton's collection, not just the way in which his racial science was constructed, but also in understanding the ways in which scientific racism is foundational to so many of the institutions and the disciplines that are with us today.
This archive is centered around a figure by the name of Samuel George Morton. He was a Philadelphia physician who, among other things, collected human skulls. And he collected human skulls and he measured them and he wrote books about them, trying to support white supremacist ideology through what he called and others called and others sort of framed as a science.
So when the project came to us, I thought, well, I don't know if that's right for We Are the Seeds, because We Are the Seeds, we focus on joy and celebration of who we are as contemporary Indigenous people. And then we talked to Paul and we talked to Rachel, and they were like, listen, what do you think? What do you think that you can bring? What can We Are the Seeds bring in? And they were just kind of open. And I suggested Zachariah Julian, who is actually on the We Are the Seeds team. Zach is an incredible musician, composer, and theater maker, and he was the first person that came to my mind.
What do I hope to express? That we're still here. He didn't win. That whole idea of eugenics, it doesn't work. It's not about, you can't belittle people, you can't belittle races and cultures like that. And that is what I want to get across, is this ideology, these philosophies failed, and we fought against so much. I think the context of it, of what he did, it's pretty heavy stuff. And how do you even begin to start a musical piece like that? Like where do you draw the line? Do you draw a line? And how do you interpret all of this? That challenge alone was what inspired me. How do I tell these stories? How do I tell a story? The main thing is I wanted to wait till I was here, till I was actually with his papers, because then you're in the head. You're in the head of this guy as much as you can be. Immediately when I'm getting this amazing tour from Rachel, inspiration's coming. I can take this angle, I can approach this angle. And that's really the process, is just to digest as much as I can emotionally and mentally, and then create art.
God is coming over, Hey-oh, hey-oh, Mungani's coming over, but not home. This is what they do, make a science of you. Then they change your name and burn your home. Mungani's coming over. Hey-oh, hey-oh, Mungani's coming over. Hey-oh, they're taking all our culture. Burned our home, burned our home. They're taking all our culture. Burned our home.
Speculative history to me, so there's like speculative fiction, right? That's sci-fi and fantasy, and that's just thinking in terms of like speculating and imagining and creating worlds, and all of those themes are what come to mind. So when I say speculative history, I think it's applying that same fluidity and that same ability to imagine, but putting that in a historical context. And for me, I like it because history is thought of as something that's so rigid and so absolute, but for Black people and Black communities, we are dictated by that. Finding those things and experiencing this process of being a Black person, coming into this space and saying, I want to learn about my history and what happens when I want to do that. History as a framework and as a form is something that we have, it's not new, we have participated in the ownership of it, but it's also looking for where does that exist for us actually? How do we actually communicate and exchange our histories within Black communities, and how do we uplift those voices and those methods as real historical processes that are relevant to us? Like, we're in a room full of all these artifacts and all of these paintings, and they're all white men, and and I have this question of like, what is the thing that took this from being just a book that somebody had or a painting that some guy did? What had to happen to it to make it a historical object? Is it the exchange between rich people? Is there a document that made it historical? Why is it that, if I paint something today, it's not likely that it's gonna, be in a museum at some point. But there's something that happens that changes an object from a thing in your grandma's basement to a historical object. One of the standards that I set for myself was actually, I want to work with my friends. Like I know a lot of really, really cool and smart people personally, but I also know a lot of cool and smart people that I could look at their resumes and I could probably have sent them an email and tried to get them to come and work because they're qualified in a certain way or other. And for me, my friends are also qualified and very skilled, so I'm very privileged in that right. But I chose to create a space that was comfortable because I also wanted to reflect something that I've seen in these various histories that I've found. These people knew each other. And I think that gets taken out of our history because it's made to seem as sterile and alien. So when you think about Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and all these people, and they wanted to create this idea of their authority and them as these great enlightened minds of the time, which is an ironic thing for Black people to think in that way, because it's like the people who decided that they were enlightened minds and the decisions they made to make themselves enlightened minds still relied on slavery, still relied on the fact that they had relationships with enslaved Black people. another thing of that is the fact that it's like, y'all know each other. Y'all are in community. Y'all go to parties together. Y'all like drink tea together. Why do we have to pretend like that's not a part of the historical process? So for me, in creating a historical process, a new or revisiting this historical process with Black people, I want to include the fact that like, these are my friends who I hang out with, and they're smart and I value their opinions. And I want to bring them into this platform because I get to do that, you know? And that's what they did, and that's what they do at all these times. You find in all these different pockets, all these presidents went to school together. They're going to the same country clubs, but that gets removed when you're talking about a constitution. Why? Y'all are a bunch of friends hanging out, writing a document. So this group of presenters is unabashedly my friends, people who I ran into, people who I work with, and that's intentional because that's where I learned so much of what I've learned for years. Some of the smartest people I've ever talked to are like people I've walked past on the street.
I remember them innocently, the people and places I know best. The images in my head are tinted by the wonder that comes with being a kid. I cherish those childhood memories now with the knowledge that I was accustomed to the harsh realities, ever-present danger, and clunky adventure that is growing up in Philly. I remember the most when I'm traveling. Every time I drive around this city, I pass a core memory that is so deeply meaningful to me, even if it's mundane or actually exciting. Walking the streets as an adult, I am in awe often of my younger self, her resilience, her thirst for adventure, and her enthusiasm for life. I look at this city and I see 1,000 stories, and I weave them together to remember my childhood, my family, and my home.
I can't stop chasing my dreams. Every night I lay my head down but I can't sleep. My thoughts keep running around because I wanna be everything that I imagine. Yeah, it'll happen. I can't stop chasing my dreams. Every night I lay my head down but I can't sleep. My thoughts keep running around because I wanna be everything that I imagine. Yeah, it'll happen.
I've had an interest in American history and American history painting for some time, for more than a decade. And this painting is an amazing example of how America creates its own fiction. And this painting being where it's located at the Library Company, its history of when it was produced in 1790, 1792. It's a prime example of how we actually have develop an idea, we have a concept, maybe we try to see how we can execute it in America, and then how possibly we fail. So for me, the painting kind of allowed for me to kind of go back to a very key moment. Because sometimes in history, we look at artworks and we don't exactly know where we begin. How do we actually get into that work? How do we describe it? But then in this case with this work, it's very specific. We understand who painted it, who asked to have it painted, why they want it to be painted. So there's a lot of information there to actually like excavate, and that's why I was very interested in working with this painting. As an artist and as a legacy of what it means to be an artist, there's a history of artists working on commission. And so this is a commissioned work, and this is an interpretation of someone's commission. So I think some of these histories about what it means to be an artist and how we maybe have these ideas of the current artist, the artists of today, and how we are like just like an entrepreneur unto ourselves, unbeholden to anyone. Like, that's not true, you know? So I think it can maybe bring some clarity to that. I think when I was younger in my practice, I was very clear about, I want you to feel what I'm feeling on this. I want to convey clearly what my emotion is. Now I find that I have to be in it for my reasons, and I get what I need out of it, and I feel whatever emotions I need to feel. But I'm also have become a little bit more open to the myriad of interpretations or feelings that people have. And sometimes they have much more interesting feelings than or perspectives or takes on what it is that I actually produce. Younger me would have been a little bit like, you know, adult me is more like, well, that's amazing. My experience though, working with actually the library company itself and all of its staff has been amazing. They've actually brought me in several times to actually look at information, documents, artwork. You know, they've been a really strong partner in trying to actually help me facilitate making this.
I knew I needed to actually ask questions of other people in this community to actually understand what it is that they need. What is it that they fear? What is it that they desire? And this opportunity came about, and then I could finally ask that question. I've been sitting with that probably since the last election, and didn't really know how to express it in my work.